In today's meeting are Sherry Broder, Don Chang, Brickwood Galuteria, Ryan Kanakaole, Luis Salaveria, and myself, Hulu Lindsay. Administrative and technical support are provided by Stacy Ferreira, Everett Ota, Amber Kalua, and Arlene Aguinaldo. First on our agenda is discuss and determine a scope of work for a contractor to complete the inventory assessment and financial review of lands and reporting for the State of Hawaii Public Land Trust. Amber, is anyone signed up to speak on this item?
No one is signed up to speak on this item.
Okay, members, this item is open for discussion. And if I might call on Dawn to just explain the telephone call she received that caused us to call this meeting. Dawn?
Thank you very much, Chair. So yes, I did receive a call from Speaker Nakamura, and she has subsequently forwarded a letter to both Stacy and myself confirming essentially what she expressed to me is the House received the draft bill, and she had questions regarding wanting to see a scope of work, an agreed scope of work, and wanting to ensure that there's an accountability of how the funds are spent. But I think before the bill moves on, she wanted to ensure that there was an agreement on the scope of work, the milestones, and the time frame, and how the money is going to be spent. So with that being said, that was and so I made a call. I think Chair Lindsay also received a similar call, and maybe perhaps Stacy might have as well. So we appreciated OHA timely scheduling this meeting. I think both Stacy and I received Speaker Nakamura's letter dated February 19, 2025, where she is specifically asking the working group. The House requests the following information. 1, proposed scope of work for any third-party independent consultant, including detailed descriptions of the consultant's tasks and responsibilities and specific objectives and deliverables. 2, preliminary budget breakdown detailing where funds are expected to be allocated. And 3, project timeline and milestones. And she has requested that this information be provided to her by March 5th, 2025.
So we can see that we have a very short time period. So my understanding, members, as I read our agenda, complete the inventory, do an assessment, and do a financial review of lands. Those are the 3 items that we need to scope the work out. So I'm gonna turn that over to Sherry. I asked Sherry to do a little bit preliminary work prior to today so that we wouldn't be starting from scratch. Sherry?
Okay, well, I was certainly glad to see the letter. Thank you very much, Ryan. Mahalo for sending it to me. I was relieved to see that we have till March 5. So I did work on a draft after Chair Lindsay called me. It's just a preliminary draft, and I did share it with Ryan. Unfortunately, not until was it this morning I sent it to you, Ryan? I didn't want to bother you in the evening.
I think it was this morning.
Yeah, but I didn't finish it till late. I figured you had the kids, so I sent it this morning. And it's just a draft to get it started. I tried to look at what the assignment was to NNK when OHA did the financial review of the revenues in 2016. And I did look at some federal DOI scopes of work for especially revenue issues. And I did ask Ryan for some information about what is the job description for abstractors for the state. So anyways, I did do a draft, and I know Ryan was working on it this morning. So Ryan, do you want to put my draft up on the screen, or do you want to put your track changes up on the screen so everybody can have a look at where we're at? It's not that long, but not as long as usual for me, but and I didn't include a timeline, and I didn't include budgetary allocations because when I was told about the call, it seemed like it was only for scope of services. So that still needs to be done. What do you think, Ryan, we should do?
Oh, I don't have any track changes right now, but
right.
we can walk through the draft. I can
All
share
right.
the draft, or would it be easier to?
I sent it to Amber to share it, and she also has the letter from the Speaker of the House.
Amber, can you throw it into the chat, the document, and then since we're all on our computers, then we can pull it up.
It'll work.
You don't want to
Yeah.
do a share screen, Ryan, so that people
Dawn has her hand up.
specific
Yeah.
comments, we could add them on.
So Chair, if I
Don?
might,
Yes.
so, and thank you, Sherry. I think Ryan did forward to me what you forwarded to him. I guess I want to make sure that we're all on the same page as we only have 1 hour this morning.
Okay.
And my understanding of what we were requesting, what the working group had agreed to was not, it was an inventory of, to ensure that the ceded lands inventory was accurate. It wasn't to look at revenue at this time, but it was looking at the accuracy of the inventory. So, because that, my understanding, we'd all agreed that forms a basis upon which OHA then then we proceed to the next step, which is looking at the manner in which each of the state departments are reporting revenue. And then we can account for the 20%. So I'm of the view, and I think that's in my discussions with Speaker, that was her understanding of what our request was to do an audit of the PLTIS to ensure that it is accurate. And so, I know, Sherry, you're looking more at the revenue and you looked at N&K. But I guess I would ask this body that our time is short today, and so is our time frame to respond. Is there an agreement on what's the third-party consultant going to look at, the revenue or the inventory? Because it is a very different scope of work depending upon which tasks we're asking them to look at.
Can I clarify?
Yes, go ahead, Sherry.
Actually, what I wrote addresses both the inventory and the revenue. And I guess I thought it was clear we were looking at both, and that we wanted to look at both. And it seems to me like it makes sense to do both at the same time because, one of the important issues is the revenue. It is true, I think, that if the inventory is not accurate, then I'm not, and I think the problem is both systems are self-reporting, and no one has ever done any kind of audit of the PLTIS. I know it was a big job to get it done, and at least there's a beginning, but the agencies don't have the same kind of resources that DLNR has to check title, boundaries, TMKs, things like that. So maybe we could at least just go through, start by going through my section on, if you look at what I drafted, it's 1 and 2. 2 is the inventory, what to do about the inventory. So maybe we could start with that. Maybe you could think a little bit more about if it's a joint project with the revenue. It seems like if they're going to be talking, the consultants are going to be talking to the different agencies anyways. I think it's good to do it at the same time. And I don't know, I'm a little concerned because O has been waiting forever, for 40 years, for its fair and just pro rata share. And I don't want to, I'm concerned about putting off the audit of the revenue. Amber, could you put it up on the screen? No,
Any
this is
folk-
the N and K one.
Oh,
Yeah, no,
okay. Let me stop share.
let's get the word audit in the title.
Okay. Hold on.
May I make a suggestion at this point?
Okay.
Because our conversations are relating to, but it effectively is an audit, right? Where we're asking for, it could be two thing, the inventory and or the accounting side of things. But usually in an audit, and this might be a term of art, but it's the auditors have a little bit of discretion in setting the smaller level objectives, but usually, when we request auditors, we give there's a objective, right? And that precedes the scope of work. So the high level objectives, from what I'm hearing, is aligned with Act 226. So that would be validate accuracy, completeness, reliability of self-reported, PLT data, as well as the reported pro rata. Right? Is that those are like the high level objectives?
Right. I mean, at least I think that's right.
Yeah.
Why don't you go to number 2? Because Dawn seemed like she wanted to start with that. Okay.
I emailed a copy of this document to all the members so that you can also look at it on your side as well, the whole document.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Chair, Louis has his hand up. Maybe.
Yeah, sorry. And we kind of started and I'm looking at this and I agree that I think that there needs to be a comprehensive look, but we cannot, my viewpoint has always been, we cannot get to accurate revenue if we do not have an accurate inventory.
Right.
So it is sequential, right? I think we need
Yes.
to start with inventory before we move to revenue. That doesn't mean that we can't like contract out and do that at the same time, but the scope of works are going to be relatively different. Actually, they're not relative, they're going to be different actually. But so I think that's something as we kind of draft out this scope of work. My viewpoint, and then following with 226 was sequential inventory, revenue, pro rata share. I think that was the logical progression of things.
Yeah. And after that, we have to figure out a process on how they determine that 20%. But that would be after this first 2 scopes.
Yeah.
And if I may, Chair, and Chair, that is my understanding as the way that I think the House is looking, the Speaker is looking at this,
Yeah.
is that it's an inventory, it is an audit of the inventory to ensure that it's accurate. So, because I would agree with Louis, it is a very different scope of work that both you did for NNK and that we did for Act 54, or not an audit, but at least coming up with the scope of work for the inventory that we completed under Act 54 versus an audit that you did under that had with NNK. And I don't know how long I think the intention of this was trying to complete this within a year. And so it's trying to, because I will urge all of us, if we don't come up with a scope of work, I don't know if we're going to get funding for this. That's just the impression I got.
Yeah. I agree.
And I think we could make it relatively, descriptive enough to provide some degree of confidence to the speaker and to the House that, I mean, we've been doing this now for, gosh, for well over a year, that we know the things that need to be fixed. And, the PLTIS system it is what it is. It's an information system. And we're trying to make sure that the data that's going into the PLTIS system is accurate, and that there's a process kind of developed in terms of how that information gets in, and there's correct checks and balances around making sure that that there's to some degree standardization, but accuracy is going to be the key, right?
Yeah. So, okay, with all that in mind, how do we proceed?
Does it
Ryan,
make
Sherry?
Yeah. Sorry, Chair, but does it make sense to approach that first part as a data issue, making sure that we have the correct data?
Yes.
Yes.
And if that's the case, I mean, I think there are institutions within state government, like, even within we actually have a chief data officer now that actually looks at all the data that all state systems are collecting to making sure that there's accuracy and integrity on that data.
Mhm.
And that person actually resides in of all places in the Enterprise Technology Services division. And one of the things that the ETS group does, and sorry not to belabor this, but they're also working on like developing and making sure that our existing systems our business processes are correct for the financial system. In some ways, making sure that the business processes for the PLTIS is correct too as well could very well fall within their wheelhouse. And I'm just thinking out loud here, Chair.
Sherry?
Is that person, what do you call them? The chief data
Chief data officer.
officer? Is that person addressing the issue that you brought up before, which is that the state agencies use different kinds of methodologies for data collection? And some are computerized, some are still using paper.
Very much so.
All
Very
of
much
that.
so is that's part of her wheelhouse, is like
Yeah.
looking at how government collects data, actually, and stuff. And what we do with it is another thing that she's responsible for.
Yeah, well, probably $1 million to even just do the PLTIS audit. It's probably going to take $1 million to really do it. There's 40 agencies to give information.
Yeah.
But I'd be interested, if you don't mind my asking, if Trustee Galateria has any thoughts before I make up my final mind.
Thank you. And good morning, everybody. The question of where do you start? So you got, I mean, not to be facetious, but you got one guy over there saying, this is public lands, this is not public lands. This is public lands, this is not. Now, I'm being oversimplified on that matter, but who does that
Determination.
particular, pardon me?
Determination.
Yeah,
Who determines?
who is that one person who is going to say, this is public lands, this is not public land? That's even before you get to, okay, now let's find out what the public lands mix. Because we want to get a clear inventory of what the public lands is before we proceed to determine how much those public lands derives in revenues, and certainly it's going to come to OHA. So the question is, who determines what is a public land and put it in that file? So that's my question. Who does that go to? Sherry? Does it go to Don? Who does that go to? Where is that question answered? Louis?
Well, I think what we're trying to do is get a independent third party to evaluate that decision making by the different departments.
Okay, so that says a lot right there. So every department is going to determine on their own what is a public, what goes into the public land file?
That's what's happening right now.
No, so if I may clarify,
Go ahead,
the
Dan.
public land trust, it goes back to what's the source of title? Where does the land come from? It did, where these lands, so 98% of all the lands are ceded lands. That's what our inventory says. So I know during our previous discussions, there was concerns about, there's a perception that DLNR's PLTIS is not accurate. So I think that was the desire to let's address that perception and do an audit of the PLTIS. The PLTIS is based upon Act 54 that was passed in 2011. And that's how DLNR established the scope of work for the PLTIS system. And I'm sorry I didn't make a copy, but I went back and I got what the scope of work for that PLTIS system. It is a very detailed breakdown of the scope of work. It's project management, it's requirements gathering, it's technical specifications, development and testing, training and documentation, implementation. My suspicions are that is what Speaker Nakamura wants to see in a scope of work. Not what the issues are, but what are we going to ask this third-party consultant to do? Yeah. And the real question is, does the PLTIS meet the requirements of Act 54? Because Act 54 sets the foundation for the 20% or the revenues that go to OHA. So, I mean, I thought it would be helpful to start from what was the scope of work that DLNR used to establish the public land trust inventory system, because that was determined by the legislature. Because I think we've all talked about this. Ultimately, this is a political question to be addressed by the legislature. How much is OHA entitled to? The courts even said that this is a political question. But for us to get to that political question and determine what's revenue and how much is OHA entitled to, I think we all had agreed we need to ensure that the inventory is accurate. And we all talked about having a third party, independent, and maybe Lewis's suggestion about ETS, I mean, they already do this, but maybe we provide a specific scope of work. So I do believe that is what Speaker is expecting out of us, that we are going to agree on a scope of work to do this independent assessment that we're asking the legislature to fund.
So Don and Sherry, do you feel that we have enough time between now and March 5th to accumulate this information and get it to the Speaker? Is that?
I think we have to do a scope of work. I mean, but I think it's if we build upon, and I obviously I come with a bias, but if we start with what was the scope of work we used when we developed the PLTIS, and then look at what are some of the shortcomings that we've identified, that Sherry's identified in the PLTIS, and how do we refine that scope of work so that it addresses both Act 54 and the gaps that have been identified in the existing PLTIS. But I think it's possible.
Sure, you concur with that?
I guess I'd have to see the original scope of work that was utilized. There is a report by R.M. Towell that predates the work that was done, and I did use that in developing what I wrote for today, what I drafted up for today. I do have one just technical question, which is when the PLTIS was developed, did the SLIMS inventory go into, was that utilized? Because was that utilized? So, I mean, that's something that Ryan and I could talk about after this meeting.
Yeah, so Sherry,
I've pointed this out so many times, but I'm sorry to bring it up again, Dawn.
Yeah.
But Act 54 specifically does set the standard of accurate and complete inventory. So I think there is that issue. So I think if you could take a look at what I did draft up for today, maybe criticize that in particular, so we could have more direction. I mean, at least I got it started, so we could have more direction. And without committing yourself, Don, you know, in case you want to talk to your folks, you know, who probably know more, or the state abstractor, that, you know, DLNR has a lot more resources than most state departments to be able to address what Trustee Galataria brought up about, like, who's going to decide what the chain of title is. DLNR.
Should we pull it up? Should we pull up your draft? Don, are you okay with that?
Yeah, no, we can look at what Sherry's drafted.
Okay.
And then I'm looking at what our scope of work is. And I'll
Don,
make
I mean,
Yeah.
Amber, can you pull up the draft that Sherry did?
Yeah, number 2 was about the audit. So. Okay, so keep scrolling down. Okay, so here, a team of professionals. Go back up to number 3. All right. Page 3. Page 3, this paragraph, a team of professionals, paragraph 4. Okay. So I think given, okay. Then I went through all the things that DLNR says on its website, which you've all seen before, which are potential areas for inaccuracy or incompleteness. Okay, then keep going. So the different kinds of people who would be the professionals who would need to be involved, but included in that would be people who would be able to address Trustee Galataria's question, which is really one of the bottom line questions, which is what, you know, if it's not categorized as trust land, is that accurate?
If I may, Chair, I thought of an idea, and maybe to help frame this in terms of what the scope of work might be. What it sounds like, because we're relying upon a system here, and I think for those of us that were involved in Sarbanes-Oxley in the 2000 era, right? It was all about how the business processes work and results in how the transaction gets recorded into a financial record. This kind of seems in some way, if we were to do an audit or a business review or a management audit of looking at the process of which information is entered into the PLTIS system, that provides us with essentially the framework of the flowchart on how the information flows in. We can get standardization around, what's in there. We have the titles; those things are public record, and then we can develop a whole process and system, standardized system of information going into PLTIS, which would help the accuracy. I'm just thinking out loud here. Don't everybody talk at once. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, I appreciate that. Liz, Sherry, if I could just share, so this is some of the language in the scope of work. And I think I would suspect that the legislators are going to be looking for language similar to this, because they may be used to that's our scope of work on. Because I appreciated what you put together, but a lot of what you put together is it's more, what are the problems? But I think we need to look at specific, what are we going to ask these consultants? And I guess I would ask us, I would ask us to look at this the other way. Rather than you've identified who the team is, we should identify what are we going to require, what are we looking for in this audit? And then you work from there to identify who we need. So this is what the DLNR scope of work was. DLNR is seeking consultant services to develop a comprehensive public land trust system. The scope includes Act 54 requirements, analysis of how each agency manages applicable lands, and analysis of the existing PLTRR system. So that was the Public Land Trust Revenue Reporting, PLTRR system. And it includes, there shall be a mechanism for the integration between agencies' source systems and the new PLTI system to facilitate data transfer, as well as user interface, which will allow agencies to maintain data manually within the new comprehensive system. I guess what I'd like us to consider, because I know I'm just rambling from this scope of work, but maybe, and Ryan and Sherry have always been such great, they've worked so well together. If Ryan and Sherry met, taking what DLNR scope of work are for the PLTIS, Act 54, and then taking Sherry, and then see if they can come up together something that we can all review. Because I don't think we're going to be able to draft a scope of work today, right in this, the next 30 minutes. That may be a working group of Ryan and Sherry to pull together those existing documents. Ryan?
We can do that. I've been trying to draft on the fly, taking in what I could, from the conversation. Sherry, I think, and Don said, I think a lot, you're, looking at this draft scope, it identifies the problems. And I think typically, usually you don't want to pre-identify the problems for the reviewer. That's part of their planning process and scoping the objectives. I think that so for me, the ask from speaker, we can probably articulate the objectives, the responsibilities and tasks and deliverables in a very short fashion. And I'm more inclined to do that just to give more room for the reviewers as they do their work. So in my fashion, I have something to share with the group now to just get everybody thinking. So I'm going to share my thing. And this is just like I'm only on number 3, the deliverables part, so we can talk. Okay, so let me share screen. Okay. So can everyone see?
Yes.
Yep.
So what it appears, so there's 2 things, right? It's 2 components. So there's the PLTIS review, and then there's also the financial accounting / business review, call it what you like. Very high level objectives, right? Same thing with the responsibilities and tasks. I think the ask from Speaker Nakamura, she might want a little more detail here, so I'm going to need a little more help on that number 2 thing. But I think the objectives are plainly stated, short, and then the deliverables. I know that there's going to be a report, as typical, and a presentation from the reviewers, but I think we want something interim, right? Because I don't know how long this is going to take.
Actually, this is really good, Ryan.
So I'm just like fresh off of like having a initiation meeting with auditors yesterday, so I'm just like thinking in audit mode now. So
yeah, I like it too, Ryan. I think that this looks very good, and I like the way it's very more general. I think I agree with you that I think your comment that we don't want to be saying what we're looking for, right? They're going to do an audit, so it's up to them to find what they can. So I think probably needs some more work, and I'd like to take a closer look at what Don was talking about earlier, the original scope of work for the PLTIS.
no, for sure, and I'd like to incorporate.
But I think this outline is excellent.
So I see Stacy's hand up and Lewis.
Stacy?
There. Could we look at number 1, objectives, the 3rd bullet? Should we be adding federal, county as well? Lands with no TMKs, parcels without TMK, submerged lands.
Yeah, how
Because I feel like, oh, go ahead.
I think, I mean, we want to be as comprehensive as possible, right? I was just my mind was just on the state agencies because they're the ones that were reporting the revenues and submitting revenues. I'll
Sure.
leave it to the group.
So maybe we would have 2 bullet points, Ryan. One is identify issue gaps in reporting revenue across state agencies. I mean, it'd be nice to include federal and county, but I don't think we're at that point yet. And then identify issues and gaps in reporting on the inventory across state and county agencies. Unfortunately, I don't think we can be telling the federal government what they have to do or don't do.
State, county, and federal. Federal, state, and county.
Well, I don't know if we can be doing that. I mean, can we tell the federal government what they got to report?
So
Are they included in the PLTIS?
So what will happen if if you run into a wall as an auditor, you will report it. And that'll be that'll be the end of the review.
Okay. Okay.
But I think there's an acknowledgement that there are ceded lands that are being used by the feds. I think you want that captured.
Yeah.
Mahalo.
Yeah.
Louis?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, and I'm thinking about what Trustee Galatario is talking about. Again, that one particular individual, maybe, you know, another bulleted point, not to add any more bulleted point, is to document the current process of which information is entered into that gets into PLTIS. And then in similar to that last bulleted point on the objectives perspective, to recommend best practices on how information will get there and stuff. Or maybe that's a deliverable. But I think, you know, as we identify gaps and issues, we want to document the current process so that we have a baseline of which we want to improve upon.
Maybe say, okay.
Well, I think the end result of this $1 million is, quote, inventory, no matter how we look at it. If we don't have an inventory, we don't have any information that's accurate.
Yeah.
An inventory that everybody can agree is correct. And I think this contractor can start with the PLTIS, go where there's questions and start clearing it up there to get the jump on not having to do all that work, because PLTIS is very comprehensive so far. Well, where are the weaknesses and how can we correct that?
Yeah.
Because in the end, that's going to be the question. I'm telling you, it's been asked me so many times. So many times I've gone to the legislature, the inventory. And if we don't have an inventory, they don't want to talk to us. They don't want to talk to us about the revenues that's not accurate in our opinion. So we have to have an inventory that the whole legislature, governor, all of us can respect, and that it can be accurate. Because then we can base everything, all our discussions on that inventory.
Yeah. So
Chair, I got a
normal
question.
auditing procedure, right, Chair? Normal auditing procedures, you start with the system, right? And I'm using financial systems, right? You start with the financial system, and then you trace it all the way back from when that transaction started. And this would be the same thing, I think. We would take the PLTIS, start with what's inside there, and you trace back all the way how that information got inputted in it, and then you determine where, you know, was it accurate? Was there inconsistencies, or what was the base information that started that transaction going forward? And so, to your point, we will. I think starting on PLTIS is the appropriate way to go.
Okay, Chair. Listen.
Brickwood?
Yeah, thank you. Now, I'm not the brightest bulb in the bunch here. But can I assume that the Public Land Trust Information System is the Public Land Trust Inventory?
Yes.
That was the intent.
Currently what's being used, yes.
Okay, so, because I am assuming then that those who are going to be doing this work will see this as the public land trust inventory. Because that's what we're looking for, accuracy of the public land trust inventory.
Mhm.
Okay, not to belabor the point, but I just don't want to take it for granted that those who are going to be working this are like see it as separate. So PLTIS is PLTI. Yes, I guess.
Well, this is in the minds of DLNR, but there are questions, which is why, Don keeps telling us that it's 98% correct. Where's the other 2%? Don,
Well, maybe what we
No,
could do,
so, yeah, so
Don.
if I may, I greatly appreciate the conversation. I do want to go back to sort of Brickwood's comment about the inventory and the audit. So we should be auditing, and I would like to add under the objectives, Ryan. And thank you. You always
All right,
quite
stop
amaze me how you are able to synthesize all of this as all of us are talking. You're able to document it. I'm greatly appreciative.
That's
But
what I'm staring off in space on the screen.
no,
That's what I do.
but you are you are wonderful about that. But I want to remind all of us, this is not just DLNR, we just created this. This was pursuant to Act 54. So the audit should be has DLNR complied with the provisions of Act 54, which articulate the legislature finds that DLNR, the purpose of this act is to facilitate the establishment of a comprehensive information system to inventory and maintain information about the lands of the public land trust described in Section 5F of the Admissions Act and Article 12, Section 4 of the Hawaii State Constitution. That is the parameters of the audit. Does the PLTIS meet the provisions of Act 54? Because that was the intent. DLNR just didn't create this on its own. We used the specific guidance of Act 54, and I would suspect I'm not very on audits, but I would suspect that the auditors would likewise use Act 54 as the basis upon which to evaluate, is the PLTIS, did it fulfill the purpose of Act 54, and is it an accurate inventory based upon, because the Act 54 talks about which land should be identified. So it kind of goes back to Stacy's questions about federal lands. So, I mean, I think we do have to look back at Act 54 to set the framework upon which we're evaluating the accuracy of the PLTIS.
Thank you, Brian. You're good, man. You're like you're an author on the fly over here. My
Sherry?
goodness.
okay, well, I just want to point out again
Yeah.
that the language of Act 54 is very clear that it's supposed to be an accurate and complete inventory. That is language that makes it quite clear. So that's fine with me, fulfills the
But
purpose.
Sherry, it specifically says the inventory shall consist of a complete and act of all lands in the public land trust to which state agencies hold title or over which they maintain management control. It's state agencies. That's why we don't inventory federal, we don't inventory county, because the act says state agencies. So unless there's an amendment to Act 54, so I want to manage all of our expectations. There are reasons why the PLTS we don't request from the counties, we don't request from the federal government, because Act 54 only requires us to look at state lands or lands that are managed by the state.
I'm
reading the act.
Well, okay. The PLTIS is a web-based inventory of state and county-owned lands. Okay, I did make a comment when the issue of feds came up. So, I mean, if you do go to the system, the county lands are in there. There's some issues which you note on the DLNR website relating to the county, but because of course the counties are doing their own things and they probably have their own systems too. So
Sherry, because I think a lot of those lands have been EO'd by the state to the counties to manage. So they still are within our inventory. They're still with the Public Land Trust inventory. Similarly, federal lands, if they've under lease or EO, they are still under DLNR. We own in fee simple all of those lands, and we should be reporting those, but it's only within the state. So if the federal government or the county purchase lands, that may be separate and apart from what may be in the inventory.
well, it does look like from your website that you did request the information from the counties.
We do because they have lands that have been EO'd to them.
So
They
is that
still
it? You only request those lands, not lands that
I'm not sure. I'm not sure, but
All right.
that's
Well, maybe-
probably why we extend it.
Yeah,
It
maybe
would also be reporting on information that the counties have on like leases and
Yeah.
basically less than EO encumbrances.
So is this draft of bullet points something that we want to give to Sherry and Ryan to work on?
Yeah,
And-
so I was thinking maybe it kind of crosses this highlighted or shadowed bullet point. I think we can kind of work on that a little bit more. My anticipation is given the purpose of Act 54 and and what PLTIS was built for, there's going to probably be a finding on the particularly the federal and county agency reported things, but I'll leave that to the reviewers.
Sherry?
I think that would be unfortunate that at least we don't. But are you saying that, Dawn, are you saying that to the extent that the counties hold lands that have been EO'd to them, that would be, in your view, included in Act 54?
Mhm. That's what she said.
I think so, Ryan, right? Don't we include, because if those are still late lands or they're managed, but they are still part of the public lands inventory.
Yes, that's
that
correct,
correct?
because the executive order, the state retains the fee simple interest. It does not leave the public land trust inventory.
Right.
Yeah.
So, and when I said 98%, I think what I meant to say was that 98% of the lands that we inventory, they're ceded lands, 2% may be lands that we purchase, that the state purchase, but 98% have been recorded as public lands.
Okay. So with given our short time, we'll give Sherry and Ryan a couple of days. I'm not kidding. But yeah, very short time. When would you like to meet back and review this draft that Ryan and Sherry will put together? Can be anytime, early in the morning, late after work, midday. What's good for you folks?
Tomorrow.
Do we
Have
have to,
mercy.
do we have to meet again? What do you
Well,
do?
Well, we have
give
to
a letter,
agree on the scope that they're going to draft up.
but, okay, is that in the context of a public meeting?
Well, we could
not-
recess this meeting, Dawn, and
Yeah.
schedule.
I think
So
that's
that
a
we
great
don't
idea,
wait.
Sherry.
Okay.
Yeah, because that way we don't have to, I think we could recess it without having to do another public notice, right? If we recess this,
Yeah.
and we could
So
just
time
schedule it.
certain.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay,
Recess to sometime next week.
So what time is good for
To be
you
de-
folks?
to
You
be
busy
determined.
people?
Mm,
Sherry, what's good for you?
I
Ryan?
think my schedule's more flexible than Lewis and Dawn because they have to go to the legislature all the time. So I would
Next week is
defer to them.
next week is first decking.
Stacy's down there all the time now too.
But the next week is the
Yeah.
legislature on sleep, yeah?
Oh, yeah? Okay,
Yeah.
perfect. How about Tuesday morning?
Yeah, it's a 5-day break.
There's a 5-day break, but it's a lot of hearings, Chair.
Yeah, I
Oh.
know.
That time. So
Almost don't count.
if the scope can be, if there's some pre-information that could get set up, as long as we have enough people for quorum and stuff like that, just in case, but once that's put together, I like what Ryan has put together so far. I think that's almost, 70% of what we could show speaker and basically saying, these are the things that we want to accomplish with the money. That I'll just make it happen. Sure. Whenever you guys want to do it.
Because that
About-
would be helpful, Chair, if we could get a
Draft.
draft from Sherry and Ryan, and then we could send comments over to Amber.
Okay.
Then we don't violate the sunshine law, and then if we,
Well,
What-
we need to set a deadline for Sherry and Ryan to get that to us.
Well-
So,
I'll get my current draft to you, Sherry,
Okay.
post this meeting.
All right.
And then ball will be on your court. As far as next week goes, yeah, I didn't get any hearing notices yet. However,
it comes last minute.
yeah, it comes last minute. We'll work around it. Same thing.
Well, if we're gonna meet by Zoom, maybe if we met early, like 7:30 a.m. to 8:30.
That
But
works.
I know you got kids, maybe 8 to 9.
Yeah, I can do that.
And then likely, what do you think about the legislature? They're gonna,
Well, Don is suggesting you folks send us the draft and let us look at it.
So I think
we're
early
gonna
next
do
week.
that, but I think we want to meet again, so we need to decide if we're gonna recess. We need to announce right now when we're gonna meet again.
I've got 8 o'clock meetings
All right,
all next week.
okay, so I'm
Um,
not the only genius thinking about meeting at 8 and
Yeah, no, normally that would be okay, but
yeah,
most of them are with legislators, so, let's
right.
see. Maybe,
March 5th is in 2 weeks, you guys.
yeah,
March 5th is
so,
13 days.
maybe. Is there a particular time that works for everybody else?
Well,
I'll make it work too. Because it may be a short meeting if we're just there to just approve it.
yeah.
How about 9 o'clock? 9 o'clock on Monday or
Um,
Tuesday?
Maybe Tuesday, 9 o'clock on Tuesday,
That works for
assuming
me.
there's no hearing.
Works.
That works
Okay,
for me.
9 o'clock on Tuesday.
Okay. OHA continued meeting.
Yeah.
Okay,
Chair Lindsay.
Yeah.
If that is Tuesday the 25th, you have a meeting at 9.
Oh. And on Maui, yeah.
Yes.
Let's see. You said you have 8 o'clock meeting, Don, all week?
yeah, all week. Maybe, what about Thursday? Thursday, does that work for you, Chair?
No, but if it's in a bill, that bill got to get decked before.
Oh, so
before
what's the
first deck.
deadline to us? When do we have to have it? by?
Oh, but the information request, it's an information request that they wanted in form of due date March
Yeah.
5.
okay.
5.
How about
Oh.
later in the day on Tuesday, like
What they want.
4:30, 5 o'clock?
So wait, so they're gonna move the bill then? It sounds like they're gonna move the bill, but then they'll with additional information going forward because they got a
Yeah.
deck.
Yeah,
next week.
that's what I am assuming. If they since the deadline is after.
Yeah.
Well, I think obviously the sooner the better, if we want to try to get $1 million.
Yeah. The sooner the better.
What about
I
Tuesday?
I'm okay for Monday, if anybody's okay for Monday.
I have no objections.
Actually, you know, Chair, Monday I'm open at 8 o'clock.
I can
Oh.
do Monday at 8 o'clock too as well.
Okay, let's do Monday. I'm sorry, that's the one day I just checked.
Are you okay,
Okay.
Sherry? 8
That's-
o'clock Monday?
Yeah.
Okay, Louis?
I'm good.
Okay, Brick?
Okay,
Okay, Monday is good. 8 o'clock.
okay, excellent. And we'll do that virtually. Okay.
Stacy? I cannot hear you.
For auditing purposes, we need to know about the governor's message and if we're putting the funds aside to match.
So yeah, Stacy, the governor's message went down. I think that there was some concern around putting some additional money in it, so it didn't go down in the first one. I mean, I did let him know it was reviewed, but the original one, basically the first governor's budget message that went down did not include that. But considering that there's so much effort on this particular bill, does it make more sense for us to just go all in on this one particular bill as opposed to having these two different vehicles? I mean, it seems like this bill has a lot more legs to move than a budget request right now, because everything, I'm gonna be honest, everything in the budget is 100% being scrutinized because of what we're dealing with on the Fed side.
Yes.
Yeah.
So it's a bill with appropriation, in conference, it's gonna get the same scrutiny, right, with whatever is
But at
set
least
aside.
Yeah, but at least it has all of the, I mean, at least the bill will have all of the justification and reasoning behind of why we're trying to accomplish this, as opposed to a line item within it, right? So it's more visible, I guess, strategically in my view.
Well, if it goes this way, will the whole $1 million come from the general fund?
Either way, it will, yeah.
Either way, it will.
Well, I think the governor pulled back because he saw that we weren't asking for just 250,000, but we're asking for the whole million. So he thought, oh, well, they're asking for the whole million. No sense I get in with 750,000, which is what I thought was going to happen. That's the logical thinking of a common brain.
Well, then I need clarification. I don't understand the current status of where it's expected for the money to come from. Is it from the general fund?
Oh, it will be the
It
general
is.
fund. It's the
Okay.
general fund.
All right.
Sure.
Okay. Okay. Thank you. Mahalo.
Okay, are we okay then? We'll see all of you 8 o'clock Monday morning.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I ask Stacy, can you just stay on the call for just a minute?
And I think Everett has a question too.
Oh, where's Everett? Go ahead, Everett.
Thank you. So just confirming, this is a continuance of this Public Land Trust Working Group meeting
Yep.
to 8 a.m. on Monday, February 24th.
Right.
So we're providing that oral notice, and we'll be providing a notice of continuance for this meeting as it's going to be continued within a 6-day period. So we're restricted from doing the normal noticing of this of a public meeting.
Okay.
So I'll work with Amber on the necessary just documentation on that continuance.
Okay. All right. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Chair.
Thank
Aloha.
you.
Thank you.